It is July 15th of the year 1878, and in the small New Mexico town of Lincoln, a massive gunfight is taking place. The buildings in the town are riddled with bullets as those participating and those who live in town are taking cover in the various buildings. The participants in this battle were two large posses created to attempt to bring order to the region, but found themselves mortal enemies, and the infamous gunslinger, Billy the Kid. In November of 1876, wealthy Englishman John Tunstall moved to Lincoln County in New Mexico, where he intended to create a cattle ranch, bank, and store, partnering with attorney Alexander McSween and rancher John Chisholm. The county was controlled by merchants Lawrence Murphy and James Dolan, who owned the only store in the county and donated thousands of dollars to the territorial governor. When one of Murphy's partners, Emil Fritz, died in 1874, the executors of Fritz's estate hired McSween to collect Fritz's insurance policy. After collecting the policy, McSween refused to give the money to the executor as the money would go to Murphy as a debt. In February of 1878, a court order was raised to seize all of McSween's assets, but mistakenly included Tunstall's too. Thus, a posse formed to seize Tunstall's ranch, 70 miles away from Lincoln. The posse caught up to Tunstall on February 18, 1878, when he was taking 9 horses to Lincoln with several ranch hands, John Middleton, Fred Waite, Richard Brewer, and Billy the Kid. Several members of the posse shot Tunstall dead in cold blood in clear view of Billy and Brewer, as later determined by investigators from the Department of Interior. Tunstall's ranch hands, along with several of Lincoln's citizens, formed a group called the Regulators to avenge Tunstall by hunting down the members of the posse that murdered him, one by one, because they knew they would never be tried in a court of law, because Murphy and Dolan controlled Lincoln County's legal system. Lincoln County Justice of Peace John Wilson deputized them. The Regulators tracked and found 2 members of the posse, Buck Morton and Dick Lloyd, riding with Deputy Frank Baker, who hadn't taken part in Tunstall's murder. Morton surrendered after a running gunfight that took place over 5 miles, on a promise that Baker not be killed, while the Regulator Captain Dick Brewer assured them that they would be taken back to Lincoln. Many wanted them dead. However, Regulator William McCloskey, who was Morton's friend, attempted to stop them. On March 9th, the 3rd day of their journey back to Lincoln, the Regulators killed McCloskey, Morton, and Baker. They claimed Morton killed McCloskey and tried to escape with Baker, but few believed them. Tunstall's other 2 killers were shot the same day while trying to rob a shepherd near Tularosa. One died while the other was arrested while recovering. Sheriff William Brady asked the New Mexico Territorial Attorney General for assistance, who referred the matter to the governor, Samuel Axtell. Axtell decreed that the Lincoln County Justice of Peace, who deputized the Regulators, had been appointed illegally. Therefore, the Regulators' actions, which had been legal before, were now illegal. The Regulators were outlaws. On April 1st, Sheriff Brady was shot and killed in the main street of Lincoln by Regulators in a gunfight that saw another deputy, George Hinman, killed also. 3 days after murdering Sheriff Brady and Deputy Hinman, the Regulators went southwest, reaching Brazier's Mill, a sawmill and trading post that supplied beef to the Mescalero Apache on April 4th. There, they encountered Buckshot Roberts, who was listed on their arrest warrants as one of Tunstall's murderers. In the ensuing standoff, Regulator leader Dick Brewer was killed via bullet to the eye, and Roberts died from his injuries the next day. 4 other Regulators were wounded in the gunfight. Following Brewer's death, the Regulators elected Frank McNabb as their new captain, but he was killed in a gunfight with a large posse raised by the new sheriff George Pepin at the Fritz Ranch on April 29th. Pepin's posse was joined by an outlaw gang called the Seven Rivers Warriors, which coincidentally, several members of the Seven Rivers Warriors were found dead the day after the gunfight in Lincoln. The same day, several regulators took up defensive positions in Lincoln, shooting at Murphy and Dolan's men and allegedly at members of the United States Army. On May 15th, the regulators tracked McNabb's alleged killer, a member of the Jesse Evans gang named Manuel Segovia. They killed Manuel when he attempted to flee. On July 15, 1878, McSween, a non-participant in the war, returned to Lincoln with a group of several regulators and supporters, many of whom shacked up in McSween's home. However, a large force hired by Murphy and Dolan, led by Sheriff Pepin, arrived in Lincoln and surrounded McSween's house. A large gunfight ensued and continued for 3 days. On July 18th, a cavalry detachment led by Lieutenant Colonel Nathan Dudley arrived and joined the sheriff. By the end of the day on the 18th, many of McSween's supporters in the town had fled, leaving only those left in his house. The next morning, however, the house was set on fire. When McSween and several other regulators tried to flee the burning house, they were gunned down. The remaining regulators, under leadership of brothers Bonnie and Jim French, managed to shoot their way out of the burning adobe house. 5 regulators were killed and 5 others wounded, while 2 of Pepin's men died and up to 10 were wounded in what will be called the Battle of Lincoln. In September of 1878, President Rutherford B. Hayes dismissed Governor Axtell, replacing him with a man named Lew Wallace, who made it his goal to combat the lawlessness in New Mexico. By then, the surviving regulators had gone their separate ways. Several regulators continued on the wrong side of the law and died as outlaws. Wallace gave amnesty to some who participated in the war, but issued warrants for others, including Billy the Kid. Wallace made a deal with Billy that if Billy testified against Murphy and Dolan, he would be pardoned. Billy upheld his end of the bargain, but Wallace didn't and left Billy in a jail cell. Billy escaped from jail on June 17th of 1879, and Wallace issued a $500 bounty for him, sparking a legendary run as an outlaw, fighting against the infamous lawman Pat Garrett. But that is a story for another day. The Lincoln County War holds a legacy in the region even to this day, and even though Lincoln is no longer the county seat, it is still there as a tourist destination and stop on the Billy the Kid Trail. Thanks for watching.